The Institute for Studies in Asian Church and Culture is now offering formal courses and non-formal courses on transformational development, business and social entrepreneurship, and intercultural studies through the Asian School for Transformational Development. ASTRAD integrates both cultural and spiritual sensitivity into the theory and practice of development and is rooted in the cultures of Asia. ASTRAD seeks to build a new generation of Asian leaders who will serve holistically by combining executive skills and servanthood with faith-based compassion and deep understanding of integral mission. For more information about ASTRAD, email us at isaccglobal@gmail.com or marie@isacc.net.
Ang atin pong panauhin, pandangal ngayong gawing ito ay isang clinical psychologist at national scientist, social scientist. She's recognized as the first ever outstanding professional in psychology from the Philippine Regulatory Commission or PRC. What a feat. A retired professor, former chair of Ateneo's Psychology Department, former president of the Psychological Association of the Philippines or PAP, and she's also the founder of Mindfulness, Love, and Compassion. Kuya Jay, parang ngayon pa lang nauuso sa mga kabataan yung mindfulness, pero nauna na pala si Ma'am, ang ating bisita ngayon, no? And that's from the Institute for Psychological Services, which use the science of psychology for the well-being of Filipino families, especially the marginalized and traumatized. Madaming yan ngayong panahon na ito. She is the author of 14 books on the Filipino psychology, such as Filipino Children Under Stress, Family Dynamics, and Therapy. Nawala ang ilaw ng tahanan at pakikipagkapwa damdamin, accompanying survivors of disasters, at marami pang iba. Hindi ko na po papatagalin mga kasama sa ISIP-ISAK, Kuya Jay. Everyone, let's all welcome Dr. Hani Karandang. Magandang gabi po, Dr. Hani.
Tonight, we're talking about something that talagang very, very relevant. Actually, we are experiencing it now, whether we know it or we are aware of it or not. It's the grieving process. It's about grief. And we know in the, let's say, 1 year, almost 2 years of the pandemic, we have experienced many losses. Napakadaming losses, no? Loss of loved ones, of course, the most painful. Loss of job, loss of freedom to do what you want to do, to go out, to meet with friends, to dine. Maraming talagang losses that we suddenly experience. In fact, now we are already getting to the point na pwede nang lumabas. But I think even if we have less cases, people are so eager and excited to go out. I think we need to stop first and pause. No, we should not just keep on going and going just because the cases are not pwede na tayong lumabas. It doesn't mean that we have stopped grieving. And I think that's what we need to talk about here. That our grief, our anxiety, the anxiety inside us is still there. It just doesn't go away. So we carry it with us, no? And sometimes we think we just deny it, so we go out as if nothing happened. And it's not a good thing because it stays there and it affects our lives even for a long, long time. So what we need to do is we need to have conversations like this about it. We need to talk about it. We need to demystify it. We need to destigmatize it and have more comfortable ways of talking about it. And we need to face it. In other words, we need to grieve collectively. What we're doing now is we are grieving, we have collective grieving. No? And it's very important for us to, first of all, accept that. We don't just so-called move on. We pause and we look inside and see kung ano nangyayari, what are the feelings we have. We don't just push them away or deny them because they will not go away. In fact, the paradox of emotion and intense feeling is that when you're feeling very, very intensely, let's say sadness or anger, and you don't face it, you deny it, you go on as if it's not happening, it controls you. It affects the way you live. It affects the way you relate to people, especially, let's say you're a parent, it affects the way you treat your children. It affects the way teachers treat their friends, treat each other, people treat each other, depending on what they are feeling inside them. And if they don't know it, if they don't own it, they project it to the other people. And the easiest people to project this to are the children. So I think it's very important that, first of all, we own it. We know that we are feeling this grief, sadness, loss, and we accept it. And then we go through it. We help each other go through it. No? And I think that's a very, sa Pilipinas kasi, in different parts of the world, of course, there are some cultural rituals about grieving. No? Iba-iba yan. Just let me tell you something. Actually, I'd like to say that this is also we're experiencing it now. And I myself, just a few minutes ago, came from a mass for the death of a very dear friend. So it's right there. No? And you see people are really feeling the loss. And what's important is we allow ourselves to grieve together. No? Mahirap yan, pero ngayon pwede na. Pero when I gave a lot of talks during the pandemic. Parang yung pandemic, meron siyang stages eh. We went through different stages. The first stage was, nagulat tayo. We got, nung first stage of the lockdown, we all got shocked and first mixed feelings. Parang, ay, sarap, walang traffic, hindi na ako kailangang pumunta sa office, and ganon. But then it started to become very, very difficult because sa isang lugar, hindi makalabas, nagkaroon ng conflicts sa families. And I had to deal with so many family conflicts during the pandemic, especially during the first and middle part of it. Towards the end, people got a bit used to it. But before this opening, before people could get out, ang lumakas, nag-triple ang cases namin sa aking team. I have a team of very highly trained psychologists who do this work, no? And ang hirap kasi online. You know, to help people online is not easy, and people to do their lives online is very different from live, no, from face to face. So now the wakes are already face to face. So okay, so one of the things we need to look at also is our way we grieve. Just briefly, just comparing it with my experience in the Western world. I mean, in the US particularly, when I was working there. A good friend of ours, psychiatrist also, no? Because the one who passed on also now is the psychiatrist, a friend of mine. And we were sitting in the church, and you know, there was no pandemic then, but people were not talking, they were not crying, they were not, they were not expressing anything, and that to them was the way to grieve. Be brave, but I felt like screaming. That's not the way we grieve, and that's not the way I grieve. So I felt like screaming, and as soon as we went out, a friend of mine went to a movie, a sad movie, brought Kleenex, and we started to cry. So, but in the Filipino way, before the pandemic, and it's starting to happen again now, our way is more natural. We express our feelings, tapos ano nangyari, ikakwento mo. Another person, ano nangyari, ikakwento mo. The wake that we have as a culture is very, very therapeutic. It's very, very healing. We should not get rid of it, no? Because when you talk about what happened, you release it, somebody listens to you, you see people care for you, you're not alone. So talagang napaka-importante sa mental health natin yung the way we grieve, no? We cry, we have food, we talk to each other for a long time, naglarap, damay yung overnight, minsan ganon, but collectively, we share the loss, we share the pain, we accompany each other. For me, that's something we should not lose, the way we do our ritual of grieving.
How does one know that he or she is grieving? Paano ko malalaman na grieving na pala ako?
Okay.
Kasi sabi niyo, just in denial, no? Pero how do I know?
Yes. How do you know? I think that's a good question, because sometimes we don't know. But how do we know? I think we know by first of all stopping the doing. Yung parang tumigil muna tayo sandali. No, huwag tayong takbo ng takbo, lakad ng lakad kung saan sa pumupunta. That's avoidant behavior eh. So kung titigil tayo sandali, kaya mahirap tumigil kasi pag tumigil tayo, we will feel the pain. So there's such greater need and greater ability for, or people are more able to deny because it's not easy and it's painful to go inward. But the only way out is in and through. So, paano mo malalaman? Tumigil ka lang sandali, malalaman mo, tapos pakinggan mo ang pakiramdam mo, pakinggan mo ang, pay attention to your feeling, allow yourself to feel, mararamdaman mo ng malungkot o masakit. Let me give you an example of a very interesting Filipino family practice or way of doing things or being handling things. No? A mother came to me because her daughter, maybe around 10 lang yun, was very, very sad. So sabi na, I'm here because I'm concerned that my daughter is so sad. Why is she so sad? She's so sad, I'm so worried. So we get to the story, make the long story short, it turns out that the Lola, who's very close to the daughter, died. So she said, why? I'm so concerned, I'm so worried that she's so sad. So I looked at her and I paused and I said, you know, I think I'd be more worried if she wasn't sad. And she looked at me, you know, and sort of like big eyes, and parang she realized something. What does that show us? It shows us, first of all, a very common thing in our families, a practice that bawal ang malungkot. Ayaw ko na malungkot, dapat masaya tayong lahat. I'm sure you've heard of it. Oh, bawal ang malungkot, huwag kang iyak dyan. But sadness is a normal emotion. The Lola died. Why should she should be sad? But why wasn't that accepted? Because the family, masaya tayong lahat, and it's the mom who couldn't accept it. Mm-hmm. The child was showing a true and appropriate emotion. The mother couldn't take it. Siya mismo ang hindi makatake siguro ng death or her own deep feelings, hindi niya ma-face, and the daughter is showing it. So sa kanya, that's something that hurts, so I can't let it in. So yun. So paano mo malalaman? Tumigil ka lang sandali, huwag kang takbo ng takbo, huwag kang gawa ng kung ano mong ginagawa mo, manood na. Basta doing prevents you from being in tune with yourself. But you will know that you're grieving if you just allow yourself to be feeling something that you are actually feeling at that moment. It's usually sadness. Yes.
Ma'am, very useful yung practical tip na yun. Na pati ako, I'm the kind of person na I'll try to be as functional as I can.
Yes, that's right. We function. That's our way of parang not facing the pain. It's not easy. Yes, go ahead.
Pero ma'am, ano yung distinction ng sadness sa grieving, sa depression, sa anxiety? Is it useful to make a distinction between these concepts, or they're just the same, different sides of the same story?
Very good question. I think it's useful to make a distinction between sadness, for example, and depression. Very important to make a distinction. I'm glad you asked the question. Kasi hindi ba people say it loosely, ay, depressed ako, but actually they don't really know that what depression is, no? I mean, they know, they feel something, but depression is very, very different from sadness. Sadness is a normal feeling that we have when something happens. We lose something. Pero depression is not a feeling. It's an illness. It's depression is you have no feeling. Depression is you are totally disempowered. You are totally overwhelmed by events and people, and you are disempowered, and you have gray. The world is gray. You don't feel sadness, you don't feel happy, you don't feel anything. You're just like a blank, parang numb, no? You don't feel anything. And but what you have is depression is characterized by disempowerment. You feel very disempowered. Para kang talagang everything is more powerful than you, the events, so it's overwhelming. And then you feel blank. Di balik kung malungkot ka or masakit ang loob mo, you still feel something. But in depression, it's all like a black, gray thing. And the thing is, depression must be paid attention to, must be cared for, must be handled, no? Because it's not a normal emotion. And when you're depression, sometimes it's, let's say, when you're sad for 1 year, na ganun pa rin yung sadness mo na malalim, that means baka it's becoming depression already. That's one. Number two, you're not just sad, you're also feeling na parang gumunaw na ang mundo. You know, you feel powerless, wala kang magawa. So even people, families, for example, who are have a depressed person, let's say a mother, a child, or a father in the family system, they feel helpless. If you notice, if you've ever tried to help a depressed person in the family, parang binabaliwala yung tulong mo, parang you cannot even be helpful to that person. I'm sure those of you have dealt with that, experience that. So parang tina-turn away ka. So the depressed person cannot feel the normal emotion as compared to sadness, which is a normal emotion. In fact, I gave a talk yesterday on acceptance, no, and surrender. And there is, when you accept something, I'm sad, I'm afraid. When you accept something, acceptance leads you into peace because you're not fighting it, you're just accepting it and you are embracing it. So when you're embracing something, it leads you into peace. And I'll say there is peace in sadness. If you accept it, I am sad. We're so afraid to be sad. But that's different from depression. I'm glad you brought that up. Very different. Depression is an illness. It's a black dog that's there all the time. When you wake up, it's there. You can hardly do anything. Ganyan. Immobilizes you. Yes.
Sorry, Marie is going to read some comments in a bit, but I just wanted to drive that point now. I just wanted to drive home that point.
Yes,
you said there's sadness. That seems to be quite contradictory, no? Doesn't it?
Yes.
Can you explain that? I think many of us might find it liberating. If just so please explain that.
Yes. That is in the practice of mindfulness. No, when you practice mindfulness, you accept everything that's all the reality and the truth inside you. You accept it in peace because that is what is true. So when you're angry, let's say you're a parent, you're angry or you're sad. If you say I'm not sad, but you go around trying to do something, your sadness comes out anyway because you're not handling it. It just comes out. You're sad, so you do things differently. Maybe ang pagsulat mo iba, pag-usap mo sa tao iba, so you're affected, even if you don't know it, even if you don't acknowledge it. If you have that feeling, any feeling, it has power over you, affects your behavior. But if you accept it, you have power over it and you handle it. So you handle it so that it doesn't handle you. So when we're sad, it's just because we have to perceive sadness as a normal feeling. So when we know that it's normal, we don't fight it. We don't judge ourselves. Ang nangyayari kasi I'm sad, therefore there's something wrong with me. Yun yung parang nangyayari. There's something wrong. Why am I sad? But you say, I'm sad because my friend left me or because I didn't do what I should do the whole day. Then if you accept it, there's peace in it because you're not fighting it. No? But if you fight your emotion, there's no peace. So in mindfulness practice, you accept whatever is happening inside you, you be aware of it and you own it. And therefore, you come to peace with it. You surrender and come to peace with it. In the spiritual sense, no, very, very important spiritually, when you surrender to God, whatever feeling you have, because you're able to accept it and say, Lord, take care of my sadness. I'm sad, but take care of my sadness. I render it to you. You can get you into peace. That can get you into a peaceful, more peaceful state. But if you fight it, you cannot be peaceful. There's always a struggle to fight it, not to accept it. So acceptance takes us into peace. The acceptance is a spiritual process, actually.
Wow.
Yes. I hope it explains it. Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
so, that actually answers one of our viewers' question. Galing kay Sir Calix or Tilak, sabi niya, Doc Honey, ano po ba ang implications ng pag-grieve sa ating pananampalataya? I think, Doc Honey, you have answered it very well. That when we grieve, it's also an act of spiritual surrender to God.
Yes.
Our to God. Beautiful po. Meron pong tanong dito from Ma'am Liana. Maganda itong kanyang tanong eh. Sa vein ng pinag-uusapan din natin. Sabi niya, I understand accepting sadness to get to the state of being at peace. Sabi niya, but what about the feeling of hopelessness? How does one deal with hopelessness?
That is the bottom of it na. Napakahirap yan. I've dealt with people, depression leads to hopelessness, no? And hopelessness leads to desperation, in despair. No, hopelessness leads to despair, and that's something so deep that's almost difficult to hold it, no? To put it into words or anything. But we know that when you are in what did she say nga? Did she say despair? No.
Sabi niya po ay paano daw po ang hopelessness, the feeling
Hopelessness.
of hopelessness. How
Hopelessness. Okay, hopelessness is a part of a depression. Okay, that means you have to say, I am depressed, I feel hopeless. Okay, but that hopelessness has many aspects to it. There is the intellectual aspect. You understand, why am I feeling hopeless? There's the emotional depth of the hopelessness, that's helplessness and powerlessness and nothing to hope for, no light at the end of the tunnel and all that. But again, if you go into a spiritual realm, you can see that hopelessness is also like despair. Meaning, despair, wala ka ng pag-asa, wala kang makikitang liwanag, no? Everything is dark, wala na akong makitang liwanag at parang wala nang liwanag. I think if a person is depressed, it's like a tunnel na mahaba, wala kang light na makita, parang endless. When it's endless, you start to feel hopeless. Again, I think, well, for me, most important of all, when you're feeling hopeless, is if you, first of all, accept it and express it. If you're feeling hopeless, it can lead to something very fatal, okay? And so what we do is, what I say is, when you're feeling hopeless, even if you're feeling hopeless, express it, talk to someone. Kahit na hindi mo na therapist, kahit na sino, talk to someone so that you're able to externalize it. Because when you're hopeless, it's there inside, mabigat, parang wala nang liwanag, wala nang bintana. So when you're feeling hopeless, force yourself to connect with someone muna. Talk to someone, a friend, a mother, a counselor, whatever, kahit sino, basta the act of talking to someone makes you bring what's inside into the outside world, which is a process that is by itself empowering. Because depression is the outside world is covering me, making me powerless. When in a depression, you try the most important thing you do, whatever you do, you have expressive therapy, all kinds of therapy. Underneath that therapy is you have to empower the person, make the person feel a sense of power. Kahit na, I was doing therapy with a very, very, very depressed 60-year-old woman who couldn't even get out of bed because she was hopeless. Nothing. Wala na siya magawa, no? Total, talagang depression. So the first thing I said to the caregiver was, and even the husband was, make her walk to the bathroom Just that. Move, move. Do something with your body and do something that's outward. No? What's inside you, bring it out. That's why, for example, art is very powerful. The arts. My art teacher, his wife died, and he healed by painting every day for 1 year. Why? Painting, music, making music, etc. Why are the arts powerful? Because the arts, why are the arts healing? Because the arts, when you do art, it's a creative activity, meaning that whatever is happening inside you, you empower yourself and bring it out, the opposite of depression. You know? That's why play, for example, in children is the opposite of depression. If children cannot play, there must be something wrong. So play is the pure activity of bringing what's inside you and imposing it on the outside world, because children are always imposed upon. They decide where to go to school, where to live, whatever. Everything is imposed on them, told to them. Therefore they accommodate to the outside world and go in. So the other part of that, which we forget even in schools and educational systems, is what is the other part of the cycle? The child must be able to do naman what's inside and impose it on the outside world. And that's what art does. So during the pandemic, I had so many people who did art to be able to feel less hopeless, to feel more empowered, to feel more alive, no? So what's even cooking special recipes and inventing recipes can be an art. If it's something that's coming from within you, hindi tinuruan ka lang, tapos ginawa mo. The main point, the main process is, which is antidepressant is, and anti-hopelessness is, bring what's inside you and express it to the outside world. That's the process, the opposite of being depressed. Yeah. So that, thank you for the question.
That's a powerful principle, Dr. Honey. Thank you for teaching us that. May follow-up po si Ma'am
Yes,
Diana.
yes,
Sabi
please.
niya, can writing be also a form of therapy? When you cannot find someone to talk to, when you are feeling hopeless, can it be also a form of therapy?
Thank you for asking it, because it is a very powerful form of therapy. Let me tell you, to share, I've taught all my students before, so almost all of them journal. Let me tell you a personal experience about journaling. I'm 70 plus, I'm still journaling. Hindi naman kailangan every day, no? And in my journal, I can have like drawings. It doesn't that ganyan, or mga bagay na lagi mo writing, but there are also drawings and all that. No, I started journaling when I was 16, and I was so brokenhearted. I thought I would die. I couldn't even take soup. I'd bring it out. Just to tell you how powerless I was. And when the sun was setting, I thought I could not bear it. It was so sad, no, that I thought this was the saddest thing I've ever experienced, and I think I don't know how to get out of it. There was no psychologist then. My mom was such a not busy, but very caring person that I didn't want to burden her anymore. And before I knew it, I got a grade 2 notebook and I started writing and writing and writing and writing. And that's what saved me. Since then, I've been journaling, and I've taught journaling to almost everyone I've met. First of all, my students, and now my patients. I remember now that here is a journal of one of my patients, because journaling, writing, instead of talking to someone, writing is very, very empowering. What's writing? It's the same. No, you have feelings inside, you bring them out, give it form, and therefore you are able to look at it and have more power over it. No? And you're more handle on it because you brought it out and you gave it form. I would recommend, that question is very, very important. I hope everybody hears how important it is to be able to journal. And that's what saved me, and that's what saved my teacher, my art teacher. And now he told me that's how he was saved, by just painting every day. And I had a friend who came here actually 3 days ago. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. First time she came out of the house during the pandemic was to come here, because I'm inside the room, but our place is like a nature sanctuary. It's a forest, no? I stay in a forest. We don't need to wear a mask because we're all distanced. The breeze is blowing, open air, house is open, bahay kubo open. and very, very vast. So she came here and she showed me her artwork, which developed into a different kinds of art medium. And then she said, this is what I have been doing the whole time during the pandemic. And it was beautiful. And that's how she survived the pandemic, because she was getting depressed. So thank you for that question. I'm glad you're doing it. That's one of the best ways to live life. I mean, even if you're not depressed, it's a good way to know what's happening to me. I look at my, oops, I felt that way pala. Oops, wow. Here is one of my drawings.
Wow. Nakakatawa.
Nagkalat na ang fake news sa social media. Let us fight fake news with the good news of our faith in Christ. Join our social media network and be an advocate of truth for the Philippines and for God's kingdom. We are looking for volunteers in the areas of content creation, research, graphic design, and video editing. To join, send a message to aprilpallaria@isacc@gmail.com.
If depression is a sense of hopelessness,
Yes.
and every form of help being extended to me doesn't make sense anymore, enters one ear, comes out the other, what would
Yes.
you
Yes.
say to make that first step? Talk to somebody,
Yes.
write it, do
I
art.
think that's a good question. Because it's a very difficult situation. When the person is very, very depressed, actually, he cannot take the first step. So it's very important in our family, for example, to be aware that the person you're living with is depressed or is not. What are the signs? No, let's say the person is not eating or eating so much, or is always in the room, not relating, cannot talk to them. You will know that the person mabigat siya, no, very heavy. So I think we have to talk about this, because this is something that's can be very tragic. I've dealt with suicides with adolescents and adults, no, because there was one case. I don't know. This might enlighten that. Go to the question. This one case where medyo iba, no, pero I'll just mention it for some reason. There's a case of a 16-year-old girl, 17 or 16. She was not saying anything to her parents. No, she lived in the house, would eat with the parents and all that, but she was not saying anything. But she was not showing anything na parang mabigat siya. So she was just there, no. So, but the thing was that was so painful was one day she just killed herself. No? So it was such a parang bizarre surprise na I didn't know anything. Sabi no, ma'am, I mean, she wasn't, I mean, she was just herself. I didn't see anything. So my point here is we need to be more observant, because that question is very important. If you're very depressed, you can't help yourself. It's as simple as that. You cannot. You cannot come from inside you and bring it out. Somebody has to help you. But maybe, but sometimes you don't. Maybe what you can do is just say, I'm feeling so bad, or ang sama ng pakiramdam. Maybe, but you may not even be able to say that. So what I'm saying is people around you, family members, teachers, parents, siblings, mga relatives, people in the house, be observant also, because this mom didn't see it. And you know what was in her journal? All kinds of naghang na batang nakadrawing, nakahang, and then there was magulong writing, and then if you decipher it, it says, I wish you had noticed. Wow, that's painful. That's why it's good that you ask that, because maybe they cannot do things for themselves, and we have to be aware. So we are family. The Filipino is not I have this analogy about the Filipino family and the Western family. No, family kasi is a system. So in the system, whatever one person feels, the pain that one person feels is felt by every other member of the family, whether they like it or not. In Tagalog, I call it, ang sakit ng kalingkingan ay nararamdaman ng buong katawan. That's the essence of family. And let's keep it. That's the Filipino family. Kahit hindi nagsasalita, nararamdaman natin. Kahit pag alis ng alis, nararamdaman natin. Minsan hindi natin ma-articulate, pero nararamdaman natin. Magaling tayong makiramdam. So yung ganun nga, no? So malaramdaman mo yun pagka nasa family ka. So let's keep that family system na we affect each other. Therefore, we can help each other. We can be sensitive to each other. Unlike in the Western family, my analogy of the eggs, itlog. Okay, the Western family is the Western individual is a hard-boiled egg, very individualistic. No, they do not relate. They have the shell and they're hard-boiled. Unfortunately, in some Filipino families, we are scrambled eggs. In other words, we are so enmeshed in our family, we cannot even see how different we are. We cannot be an individual in our family, and we have to be just, my identity is family, so enmeshed. But for me, the ideal is sunny side up or fried eggs in a pan where the yolks are independent, but the whites touch each other. So you are connected, but you allow the member of the family to be different and to be herself or himself, but you are not hard-boiled. You are connected. For me, that would be an analogy to remember. So many families I'm dealing with now are scrambled eggs. They cannot express themselves if the feeling is different from the other members, especially from the parents. The one I talked with earlier this morning was a youngest member of the family, and she felt differently from everybody, and she was judged as, pasaway, ganon. But she was just trying to be herself. She wanted to do music when everybody else was business like and taking business courses. So she was the problem. They came because she was a problem. To them, she is our problem. Why was she the problem? Just because she didn't want to go into business and she wanted to do music. So, nag-worry na yung parents, naku, walang kikitain yan, paano makakain yan, la. She could not even be herself. Because what was judged, she was judged as the problem child. But what was it? Iba lang siya. Ang hirap maging iba sa enmeshed scrambled egg family. Yun.
Wow, beautiful. Ang ganda po ng analogy. Marami sa amin ang makakaalala niyan. Lalo na pag nag-aalmusal.
Pag-almusal ninyo, huwag kayong scrambled.
Huwag scrambled. Mas ideal lang sunny side up. Families at least. Ayan po. Dr. Honey, I have here a comment.
Yes.
I'd like to connect this dun sa mga napag-usapan na din natin. Ang comment lang po ni Ma'am Veronica Mendoza, sabi niya, good evening, Dr. Honey. Have you been seeing more people who are angry and feeling frustrated for not being able to direct or address that emotion, like headless chicken going in circles? So ang tanong ko po ay, paano tayo makikipagkapwa damdamin? Using your very own words. Paano tayo makikipagkapwa damdamin sa mga kapamilya natin or malalapit sa atin na parang kapamilya na natin kapag nakikita natin na may problema pero ayaw pa nilang i-confront. Ayaw pa
Yes.
Paano po yun? Anong
mahirap talaga yan. Mahirap yan kasi ang hirap talaga nakikita mo may problema yung kasama mo, pamilya mo, kapatid mo, or even pinsan mo, or even a friend, no? Tapos hindi niya, ayaw niya harapin. Pero ikaw, ang namang problema kasi nakikita mo, kailangan niya ng tulong. Pero I think ang hirap niyan. What we have tried is first to connect with the person without confronting muna. O parang ano yung ginawa mo? Yung parang mag-connect ka muna. Anong ginawa mo? Let's say may ginagawa siyang something na you connect by saying, "Uy, ano yung inakalikot mo dyan?" or whatever, no? Connect with the person. When you connect with the person, you see the person in terms of where she's at or what she's doing. Hindi yung, kamusta yung layo-layo ng, kamusta yung kung ano mang layo-layo na hindi naman siya nandun. So, hindi ka with the person. No, you're not connected. So, you connect. Kuminsan, tabihan mo lang yung tao. Tapos, samahan mo siya. Accompany the person. No? You don't have to confront right away because hindi siya ready. Pero I've seen this when the person sees that another person is there for her. She feels it. And after a while, she can start to open up. But if she doesn't open up, you can also ask questions. And sometimes another way that has been tried is to be honest. You say, alam mo, mahirap sabihin ito talaga pero sabihin ko na rin sa'yo kasi namumroblema ako. Kasi namumroblema ako kasi parang nakikita ko na nahihirapan ka, pero baka parang ayaw mo naman siguro pag-usapan, pero sinasabi ko sa'yo na concerned ako, namumroblema talaga ako. Yun lang, gusto ko lang malaman mo. That's it. You can just be honest in a caring way, and it really makes you cannot overestimate the hope and the caring that the person feels when you do that. Parang napansin mo, kasi sabi nga nung case ko kanina, I wish you had noticed. So, kung gusto mong magkamali, err on the side of being proactive rather than not doing anything. Di bali nang ma-reject ka na tinanong mo yun, kesa wala kang sinabi. What's the worst thing that can happen? Hindi ka niya papansinin. Nagawa mo yung may nagawa ka namang na parang alam mong dapat mong gawin na baka makatulong. So reach out in a very caring way, but before you do that, connect first. Let's say mahilig siya mag-drawing, maki-drawing ka, or mahilig siya manood ng something, makipanood ka. Something like that, no? Just connect with the person, be with. Also, I'd like to highlight here the importance of feeling accompanied. You know that, no? Na hindi ka nag-iisa. Na-trivialize natin yun, but that's very, very important. And I remember what Pope Francis said to that little girl in Tacloban. I don't know if you remember, na may little girl, nilapitan siya, meron siyang problema. I think may abuse yata sa family. And I cannot forget what Pope Francis said. Sabi niya, I cannot take away your pain, but I will be with you with my open heart. In other words, makikipagkapwa-damdamin ako sa iyo. Sasamahan kita sa iyong pakiramdam. That's what he said. In Tagalog, sasamahan kita, pakikipagkapwa-damdamin ako sa iyo. Yung sinatanong mo, yun. Connect with the emotion is pakikipagkapwa-damdamin. Accompany the person.
Wonderful. Ang ganda po nun. Kahit tabihan mo lang, maramdaman lang na meron siyang company.
Yes, at saka may taong nakapansin na concerned. Oo. Hindi ka walang mawawala sa'yo.
Yes. Doc Honey, we are winding down, and I just have a question. I heard si Ate Melba then use this term, and I think this is used by a lot of sociologists now, yung tinatawag na aborted grief. Kasi because of COVID. Ang tanong ko po ay, does grief hunt? Nagha-hunting ba ang grief? May paraan ba ang grief para hilain ka pabalik kung hindi mo siya hinarap ngayon? At ano po yung dangers kapag isinantabi lang natin? Yung sinabi niyo ni Kuya Jay, function lang ng function. And maybe this is the last question from my end, then I'll pass this to Kuya Jay. But Doc Honey, your response to that po?
Yeah, what happens is aborted grief ang tawag nila, no? Okay. Another author calls it unattended sorrow. Levine calls it unattended sorrow. So there is such a thing. There's a whole book of books on that, because as I said earlier, it's very important for us to be aware of what we are feeling and to own it. That is the first step towards mental health. Okay, the first step towards mental health is that be aware of what you're feeling, allow it. There is an acronym for that in mindfulness practice called RAIN, R-A-I-N, rain on your intense emotion. What does that mean? Recognize it, allow it, investigate or inquire where it's coming from inside you or what, and then be non-reactive, non-judgmental, and nurture yourself. So, yes, that's why you rain on your intense emotion.
Beautiful. Kasi ang
Yes.
rain nagno-nourish din naman.
Yes.
Ang
At saka
ganda.
nagre-refresh.
Yes, opo. And we need that pag maalinsangan na talaga. Kuya Jay!
Yes.
Opo, Kuya Jay!
Wanted
Yes.
to thank Dr. Karandang for really making time for us. We know na galing pa kayo sa isang pagbibigay ng
Salamat.
with such a generous soul. In spite of your own grieving, you're able to
Yes.
still be.
Yes. You're
And, we want
welcome. I'm happy to talk with you, to have this conversation, because I believe that what this conversation is very, very important to people during this time of pandemic. To know that it's okay to be sad, to know that we need to grieve, to know that we should not cover it up, and to know that we can face it. There are ways, and there are people who can help us, not just for professionals, but family members. We can be with each other. We can accompany each other. We will not have to be alone. That's most important. Okay.
And I think it would be nice to end on that note. And I feel that this is a challenge for us, no, Marie, tayo sa faith communities,
That's right.
Mhm.
in our congregations, in our churches. In my pastoral work, I've
Okay.
realized that the church can be the most isolating place.
Yes, that's true. Isn't it so? You're so brave to say that. Yeah.
Ironic now. I mean, I understand this because I had to undergo therapy myself
Yes.
many years ago. And it's a
Yeah.
struggle that keeps coming back, even though I know
Yes.
that I mastered somehow the act of
Yes.
dealing with these
Yes.
emotions. This conversation, ma'am, and Marie, is parang yung kanta ni Celine Dion, it's all coming back to me now.
Oh,
Yes. Yes. It does. It does. It does come back.
it does.
But the thing is, you have gone through it.
Yes.
So if it comes back, you have
Yes.
already some resources. You have the resources inside to deal with it, which is different from
Which is
somebody
grace.
who has not, yes, who has faced
Which
it.
is
Yeah.
Which is grace. So maybe that's the question and
Grace.
the challenge we would like to share with both upon our audience, our mga kasama natin dito sa ISIP-ISAK. How can we turn our churches into safe spaces where we can be sensitive to people who are just longing for somebody to notice them? Yung
Yes.
magsasabi na, sana hindi na umabot dun sa punto na, I wish you had noticed.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Something that si Doc Tani has pointed out, yung lamay is actually very therapeutic. In other words, medyo nakalimutan na yata natin na yung mga rituals natin na nandiyan sa kultura natin are actually ways of dealing as a community, no?
Yes.
At magpasalamat tayo na ganyan ang kultura natin. Unfortunately, itong panahon ng pandemic, yun po yung one great loss na nawala.
Yes.
Doc Hani, hindi lamang yung loss ng namatay mga kaibigan, kapatid at mga magulang, kundi yung loss din ng ability to be a community so that we are able to help each other.
Yes.
Yung ganun po na mahalaga na pag-isipan natin na maigi how we can reconstruct yung mga rituals na yon in a time ng pandemic. As Christians, I think in a way, it's a good thing na tayo ay medyo mausisa. In other words, within the community, no? In fact, ang sabi nga, masyado kayong usisero, ganyan.
Kikialam.
Kikialam. But that's better than, sabi nga,
Hard-boiled egg.
Oo, na not saying to people na I'm noticing you, no? Na bakit ka malungkot, ganon. Although tuturin na merong ganong strain sa kultura na kapag malungkot ka, ang akala nila kagad may sakit ka. Pag wala kang sabi, may sakit ka ba? May mga ganon, ano. Dahil we always want our, yung masaya tayo, ganon.
Masaya.
I think yung kultura natin needs to recalibrate din yung mga, no? We are a culture of emotion and feeling. Very feeling tayo eh.
Yes.
And wag nating, sabi nga ni Doc Hani, wag nating surrender yun, ano?
Atin yun.
Yung ating yung malakas
Pakiramdam.
pakiramdam, yung mga ganyan. And hindi kailangang outrightly sabihin, yung gano'n. Kagaya sa mga Western cultures. Pero siguro, I think yung call for pakiramdaman ng maigi, lalo na people who are hurting around us. May sinabi si Doc Hani tungkol sa yung hopelessness and despair na yun din ang tanong ni Liana, no? Mahirap siguro ito for all of us na mga Christians kasi minsan ang tingin natin dun sa mga medyo may feelings ng despair, may feelings ng hopelessness, wala silang faith in God.
That's our conclusion.
So, it does not help them. Na ang ating judgment kaagad, wala silang faith in God. And I think that's why yung sinasabi ni Jay kanina na hindi na safe even yung mga faith communities. Kasi nga, kapag ito ay undergoing a great deal of grief or loss or narurungkot ka, ang tingin kaagad, dapat you should be cheerful kasi count it all joy when you are experiencing trials.
Count your blessing.
Out of context yung mga verses na yon. Ang problema natin kasi yung mga text ng scripture, apply.
Yes.
Samantalang yung tao na nag-grieve, ang kailangan lang niya is you weep. Kaya I think sa scripture, ang sabi, you weep with those who weep. Hindi naman sinabi yung mag-sermon tayo, magbigay tayo ng advice, mag-quote tayo ng scripture, which is usually out of context. It's like yung mga friends ni Job, who actually were able to be more empathetic nung wala silang sinasabi. Pero nung nag-umpisa na sila na i-theologize yung grief ni Job, that's when they were useless, no? Sabi niya, miserable comforters you all. Now, I think we need to be very, very careful sa ating mga faith communities na huwag tayong mag-add doon sa grief ng mga tao. And actually, it adds to the hopelessness din na nag-uumpisa silang magbukas pagkatapos bibigyan natin sila ng mga na out of context, yung mga ganyan. It makes
very
them
good point.
withdraw inside. It makes them withdraw more inside. Ang feeling nila, wala akong masasabihan. Ganon.
Yes,
So,
wonderful.
So, mahalaga yung caution ni Doc Hani sa atin, na we really try our best to be listening and empathetic at saka kahit na pa mukhang mausisero tayo, no? It's good to be able to say that we care for you and we notice
that. Yes, I'm concerned. Yes.
Concerned na gano'n. Iparating lang yun. Hindi kailangan yung mga marami nating Bible verses. At saka yung mga kasi sabi nga meron akong kaibigan who lost her son recently. At hanggang months na yon, and hanggang ngayon sabi niya, I'm still in grief. Sabi niya, naiiyak ako. And so I just dive into my work. Yung sinasabi ni Doc Hani, yung usual natin na and sabi niya, kailangan ko yun kasi it's a distraction. Kaya lang, ang sabi sa kanya, it distracts you, but it does not heal you. Yun ang problema. In other words, habang hindi na-address yun, hindi ka sufficiently umiiyak over that. At bakit, yung mga memories mo na hindi mo mailabas, hindi mo rin ma-identify kung bakit ulit ng ulit yung mga memories na yan. So I think it's important for us to learn how to help our friends in this way. Ang isang very interesting din is yung pag-objectify, yung either by writing sa literature, yung mga nagsusulat, malaki ang advantage kasi naisuo kaya yung mga artist, no, sabi nga ni Doc Hani,
Lalabas.
nalalabas. Merong process of objectification so that pag nalabas na, you can deal with it.
Yes.
Habang nandoon sa loob, mahirap Hindi wala kang language. Pero pag nailabas na, whether it's words or whether it's form or symbol or ganyan,
Yes.
at least mahalaga yung sinabi ni Doc kanina, it empowers you na pala. It's a very good insight for me, no? Na actually, yung fact na nailabas lang, very empowering na pala yun. Kausapin din natin yung sarili natin. Why are you troubled, my soul? Why are you cast down within me? Why are you in turmoil within
Aware.
me? Kasi nga, it adds self-awareness. Ano po yung ganon. So, siguro nga yung self-awareness is the beginning ng, yung sinasabi ni Doc Hani na mindfulness. Beginning yun ng the more self-aware, the more self-control we have. So I would like to thank si Doc Hani sa kanyang efforts to help rebuild yung ating mga pamilya in this way.